And good day, everyone. I want to welcome you back to Bascome TV. And what a show we have today, and an awesome panel. Yes, MedStar Health. And I tell you, this group has been unbelievable, giving information, from the ACL injuries to ACL recoveries. And now we're going to talk about concussion. I want to introduce the panel today. First of all, I want to thank everybody for viewing. It's been 7-8 months. You guys have been viewing. You've been enjoying our show. So let me introduce our panel that's going to be on here and educating us about concussion. So first we have Dr. Kelly Ryan. We're excited to have her here. Now, I've got some questions for her because I was one of those coaches when it deals with concussions. I was doing everything wrong. So I'm going to make sure she sets me straight. Yeah, so Dr. Ryan is going to be helping us out and giving us some information about what is concussion. Also, Laura Long. I'm sorry, Laura. I'm sorry. I knew I messed one of these name up. Laura's going to be helping us, giving us some ideas as far as when you're looking at, initial treatment, right? What does that look like? I know there's some parents home when your young people's got concussions or coming or recovering. What can you do at home? And Carissa, I will promise you, will not mess your last name up. All right. Corangelo, is that correct? Corangelo. Yep. Carissa's going to be giving us that kind of returning to play, right? What does returning to play look like? What's some things we can do and what's some of the important tips? So, we're going to jump right into it. So, Dr. Ryan, it's a pleasure having you guys here, part of this panel. And I've been excited to be a part and partnering, with, MedStar Health. It's been so important that the information that you guys give, we deliver. So, Dr. Ryan, I want to ask you, when we're talking about concussion, right? What is concussion?
So, first of all, I appreciate your honesty. Yes, we need that from our coaches, right? And we need to be able to have them ask good questions and be ready to listen. So thank you so much. I think that this is great that you're doing this. What exactly is a concussion? Well, I think that if you ask 10 different people, they will give you 10 different answers. But essentially, it's an injury to your brain. There is a problem with energy mismatch that happens. And so it's a whole syndrome. It's not necessarily one particular problem, right? But it causes a number of different types of symptoms and those types of things. And essentially, no one can really quite put their finger on specifically what it is, but it's really just how it makes us feel and what it means for our health and those types of things. So essentially, once you get hit, whether you get your head hit or whether your body gets hit, once your brain shakes in your skull, it causes a whole number of problems with your balance, with your memory, with your concentration. It can make you sleepy. It can make you dizzy. Everyone is a little bit different. So, like I said, it's hard to define, but it's a head injury that a lot of our athletes get.
Yeah, and just on that note, so what I want to do, if you guys don't mind, I want to take our viewers on a journey. Okay, so now I explained what is concussion. My next question for you is that, and as a pro coach and also a coach of young people, what are the symptoms, right? What are the symptoms of concussion? If Dr. Ryan, you can help us out to give us some ideas. What are the symptoms, right? What's some things to look for and how can we tell?
Sure. So one of the things that you as a coach will look for is when your player might be a little bit slow to get up, right? If there was usually there's some type of impact. If they're stumbling a little bit, if they're a little bit hesitant to stand, you might see them closing their eyes or blinking a lot. And that's because the light's bothering them. They might be a little bit slow to respond to you. And those are all things that you can see without actually even talking to them. And then, the problem is a lot of patients or athletes who have concussions, they don't even know that they have it. But remember, they just had a brain injury. So, of course, it's not necessarily that everyone's trying. There are some athletes who try to fake us out a little bit, right, because they just want to go back in and they want to play. And I get it. But there's also a lot of players that don't know that they have a concussion, so they can't tell you. So it's really important for the coaches to look out for these types of things, and pull them to the side and sit them down. A lot of times there's so much adrenaline going through their body that they might be able to fake it for a short period of time. But if you have any suspicion or if you saw a bad injury, it's better to err on the side of caution, pull them off, watch them, keep watching them. have their family watch them. Hey, is this kid acting right? Which is also really important. Like, I might only see him for the first time, but you know that kid better than anybody, right? If he's not acting the same, if he's, more emotional, a little bit, irritable, those are other things you can look for. But, change in personality, really tired if they're just all of a sudden very fatigued. And then as an athlete, if you start hearing like ringing in your ears, if you start feeling dizzy, if you feel like you're going to vomit, and you know that you just had a head, some type of head hit, or even just a really bad body, like blow to the body, those are the types of things that you will look for and you want to ask for help. But again, most of the time it's other people that recognize it, not necessarily the athlete.
No, that's so important. And what you're also saying, I think, with the clubs, even the parents watching, right? The one thing that was so crucial that you guys had delivered to my academy, the BFL Academy, is that you gave us some information and I had to learn about it, because it's so important. Education and just getting an understanding so you can identify. And I am gonna say, because I was just from playing pro, I had a concussion. And I was one of those, sometimes we don't know and we don't want to accept it as athletes. It's like, okay, I just hit my head, I'm okay. And the trainers came and there was actually these questions. And the questions they was asking me, I'm going to tell you, I was like, listen, I'm fine. I just kept saying I'm okay. And it was so thorough. And I went through the process, and then it was telling me, which I'm trying to figure this out. Can you say the ABC backwards? And this is me with my smart self, because I want to get back on the field. If you can say it backwards, then I'm fine. Then I'm okay. So it kind of I start to become, because I was so competitive, it's challenging. And my athletes has to be very mindful, okay? Because especially if the coaches can educate to identify, and even if they got some trainers on the side, but making sure that we got some knowledge about it. So now all of a sudden my young person is on the field. I've seen some signs, I've seen some symptoms. Carissa, my question for you, if you can help me out with this now, what should a coach do, right? Even if it's a parent, a young person bumped their head, what should we do next? What should that look like?
Yeah, I think as far as educating parents and coaches, number one of recognizing those signs and symptoms that Dr. Ryan spoke about is number one. So making sure you're aware of recognizing what a concussion looks like, because an athlete may not know, like Dr. Ryan said, or they may not want to tell you. So it's important for those around them to be looking out for them. And if you do recognize that somebody may have sustained that type of injury, it's important to remove them from play. And I would say that's the number one thing as a parent or coach. If you recognize that someone is suspected to have had a concussion, it's important to remove them from play for the rest of that day. And that it goes with our saying of when in doubt, sit them out. And Dr. Ryan kind of alluded to that if you have any suspicion whatsoever, it's better to err on the side of caution and pull that athlete out for the rest of that day. The long-term effects of a concussion are different than a lot of the athletic injuries that our athletes would sustain in their life. So it's very important to make sure that these are managed correctly. So recognize is number one, remove them from play is number two, and then identifying any red flags that may need reasons to go to the emergency room, because most concussions do not need to go to an emergency room. They just need to be monitored. So looking for what those symptoms are when they initially had the injury are also important to note, so that we can look at down the road when they do see a concussion provider, how are their symptoms progressing? Are they getting better or are they getting worse? Do they have any new symptoms, or do we have things that are resolving as well? So coaches identifying what types of symptoms that athlete had immediately after, so that the parent can continue that monitoring process, because that could be a reason why they might need to see a provider sooner rather than later. Dr. Ryan, if you want to talk about some of those red flags, so recognize, remove, and identify and refer for any red flags. And Dr. Ryan can go over some of those reasons why you look for emergency room.
Sure. And, one of the things that every game is the most important game that you've ever played when you're playing in that moment. Even if it's like 4-1, like it still matters, right? To every athlete who's ever played a sport, right? But in the grand scheme of things, even if it was a mild concussion, one, it affects your reaction time, right? So you're not at the top of your game. And so you're actually more likely to get another injury, maybe not even just a concussion, right? ACLs are terrible injuries. And if you're not fully prepared, and your reaction time is slow, it could certainly put you at risk for other injuries. But the worst case scenario is if they were to have another head injury after the first one, it just really slows your progress. It can result in death, even in some cases. And so those are the things that we really worry about. And that's why it's just so much better to err on the side of caution. And sometimes kids don't eat. So they're like, oh, well, I have a little bit of a headache, but I had it because I hadn't eaten lunch, or, I didn't drink enough water. Sometimes it's so hard to recognize that almost 20% of concussions are missed in the first day. So It's just really important to, again, err on the side of caution. So that way there's not another head injury after the first one. Because Carissa was talking about, there are some red flag symptoms that you want to look for. Vomiting is very concerning. Significant change in vision, significant weakness of any particular body part can be really concerning. And excessive fatigue, of significant change in behavior. And concussions can be very scary and they can be very dramatic. So, having, even if you have to go to the ER, to monitor for symptoms and those types of things, again, we always err on the side of caution, but ultimately it's not going to be your ER physician that's going to be doing all the counseling and management of the concussion. It's going to be someone who specializes in concussions. The ER is really just going to make sure that you're not going to die from the concussion at that time, or that there's not any significant injury. But yes, vomiting, number one, is something that's very easily missed by parents. They're like, oh, well, they're a little bit nauseous. But so you definitely want to be conscientious if your child starts vomiting. Again, change is slurring of speech, change in vision, and significant fatigue.
Okay, no,
Did I miss any?
No, that's great. No, that's great. And I am, it's so important. And coaches, I cannot tell you enough. With professional athletes, that's at that highest level where I want players to get back, right? And the one thing is that, and Laura, I'm hoping you can help me out, is that as a pro, one of my players get injured, I'm like, concussion, serious? That's the first thing I do. I'm telling you, the first thing I do. I was so ignorant to understanding what this meant. I'm like, we never got concussions back in the day. That's saying it, right? What is as far as a treatment, right? What's the initial treatment for an athlete, or just anybody going through and having, being concussed, having a concussion? What is that initial treatment?
Well, first of all, I think it's important. You brought up a good point about nobody ever got concussions. And a lot of people think that. Of course, a lot of people did get concussions. But the reason this is a huge issue is because it's not an injury you can see. Whereas somebody sprains their ankle, somebody breaks their arm, somebody hurts their shoulder, you can see that. You obviously see that somebody's injured. But it's hard to see these kinds of things, especially as Dr. Ryan mentioned, that adrenaline's pumping and that kind of thing. And sometimes there's even a delay in when symptoms start. So, you get into this habit of there's nothing wrong with you, or, you're going to be fine, or, just sit it out for a minute. And really, you have to be just to echo what Carissa and Dr. Ryan said, you have to just be very cautious about that, because you want to trust that what you're asking the right questions of the athlete. You're seeing that there's changes, and you're making adjustments for that and pulling that athlete out of the game. So initially, back in the day, we used to think that you want to just rest. If you got a head injury like this, a concussion, you would just rest and sleep and what have you. And, you just rest until the symptoms go away. And we really know that that's counterintuitive now. The first 3 days, definitely you want to rest. Your brain has been injured. You need to give it some time to recuperate. So, letting those athletes sleep and just kind of let them be in a dark space for a little while and away from lots of things that might exacerbate their symptoms, like cell phones, loud lights, loud noises, that kind of thing. Just letting them rest and calm down. And initially, too, there used to be a big habit of waking kids up every 2 hours. I guess some fear of your kid's not going to wake up if you let them sleep. But again, we know that that's also counterintuitive. And if, kids are sleepy, you let them sleep. And just being mindful of any kind of symptom changes or symptom worsening, as Dr. Ryan had mentioned. So the first 3 days are really critical to just let them relax and let them sleep and let them rest. Still try to enforce good hydration, eating habits. Don't let them skip meals. They may not eat as much, but try to get them, into the routine of staying hydrated, still eating, not sleeping all day, and getting into their regular sleep habits. And then after those first few days, then you'll kind of get a baseline sense of really what you're dealing with. And there's so many symptoms that can happen with concussion, unfortunately, that you kind of have to tailor, how you treat that. The good news is that most concussions resolve within 2 weeks. Our younger kids up to 4 weeks. So we should see that daily after those first few days, kids are starting to get better. They're starting to get less symptoms or what have you. The classic initial symptom, though, is headache and neck pain, because you've gotten hit in the head or you've gotten hit in the body and you get kind of that whiplash kind of thing. So things just like a heating pad, maybe to the neck, or just doing some gentle neck stretches are generally okay. But really, initially, you just want to let them rest and then get them into their regular daily routine. They get up at 8 a.m., they eat breakfast. They eat at noon. They are up. They may not be doing schoolwork at this time. We may be giving them some time to rest through that, but they're at least up. They're doing something. And then just taking away any noxious kind of stimuli. So we try to avoid them doing a lot of reading, spending a lot of time on the cell phone or the computer, because those kinds of things will exacerbate their headache and their neck pain.
No, that's I'm excited. It's so much information given. Just when you got the media and being able to record and just continue to play over, I'm going to make sure I send this to all my players, my parents, and my coaches. Now we identified the concussion. We're going through, we know our next steps. Now we're going through initial treatment. Now it's that next step, right? That return to play. Carissa, could you give us an idea of that? What does that return to play, like, is there a set protocol? What's the process next? Me as a coach, I'm like, listen, you're fine. This is me as a coach, right? But I've educated myself through MedStar, you guys helping me. So I'm very patient. I said, you come back when the medical team says you're ready. So what does that look like, the return to play?
Yeah, and I think this is a really important part about concussion, is making sure that you are under the medical direction of someone who's trained in concussions. If a parent takes their child to a doctor and they say, wait 4 days and then you can go back to play, we should be nervous about that piece of information, because there should be a graduated return to play process that athlete goes back to once they don't have any symptoms. We don't want to just return somebody back as soon as their symptoms are gone. We want to make sure that we slowly introduce exertional activities and getting them back to their sport activities and making sure that we don't have any setbacks. Like Dr. Ryan said, sustaining a second head injury can be very detrimental to an athlete. So we want to make sure that we do this in a very controlled, cautious way of getting the athlete back on the field. So first is making sure that they've been monitored by their medical provider and that they have no symptoms. We want them to be completely symptom-free for more than a day, at least 24 hours before we even start doing anything, to make sure that we're on the right page. Then we would go through a graduated return to play process or protocol. The first thing is just doing some general cardio, so getting their heart rate up to see if their symptoms return or get exacerbated at that point. So just riding a bike, going for a walk, going for a light jog, doing some activities like that just to see what increased heart rate does to their symptoms. If they do well with that stage, then we can get them into sport-specific types of drills, get their piece of equipment that is specific for their sport. So for soccer, we want a ball at their feet and starting to do some footwork drills, do some kicking, passing, shooting, as well as getting their cardio going and getting their heart rate raised as well. If that goes well, then at least 24 hours later, they can start doing some non-contact drills with their team. And then lastly, we get into contact drills or full live play. And if they make it through that process, then they can return back to their competition level. So we want to make sure that it's not just symptom-free, it's symptom-free and that they've been taken through a process graduated exertional protocol to get back onto the field safely, and that they don't have any symptoms returning. If they would have any symptoms at any point in that process, they would return back to the beginning and not have any symptoms, and then slowly progress back through that. And having someone to monitor that with you is great. And that's where kind of PT/OT comes in, to make sure that you have somebody to take you through that process, to see what heart rate level you should be getting yourself to in that first cardio level, to make sure that we are exerting your body similar to what you would need to do for your sport, and having someone be able to help guide you through that process.
No, that's great. That's good, and and that is important, is to return to play. Like you said, that's the biggest one, because if you return too early and you get hit again, which goes to my next question, is what point, Dr. Ryan, what point is it that we should now consider, as an athlete who's getting multiple concussions, right? What's next? Because I have I call her my niece. She's had 3 concussions. I think she had them over a period of a year and a half. And at what point do we start getting concerned? And it seems like anything now, just anything. It's not even like she's getting hit hard. It just becomes that point. At what point, like, what do we do? Like, at what point, and what decisions do we have to make from there? Is it a change of sport? Is it a red flags? Is there anything she has to do or we have to do as either parents or organization to figure out, okay, now she's had too many concussions or he's had too many concussions. What do we do? Like if there's some next steps or advice.
Such great questions. So, one of the things that you had mentioned that I hadn't commented on yet is, we all want our athletes. First of all, we love sports, right? We wouldn't be in this field if we didn't love sports. We get paid to watch sports, which is so lucky that, I have this job. And one of the things that you had mentioned was, just get back out there, go back out there. But really, ultimately, some of the worst concussions that I've seen, the most resistant concussions, the longest recoveries, are the ones who had 2 head injuries or 2 head hits, whether it be in the same game or whether they already had one and they got another one very shortly after when they weren't 100%. So if coaches really care about their athletes, whether it be as an individual or even as a player, ultimately the best thing is to shut them down as soon as possible, to err on the side of caution, and they're going to have much better results rather than having anything else happen when they're, very acute. But when is too many concussions, right? So I've had patients who have told me that they've had 12 concussions.
Wow.
And I'm not necessarily sure, sometimes is it a full-blown concussion? Was it just a little ding? Those types of things. But I've had to rest some patients for more than a year just from 1 concussion. And then I've had other ones who have had more than 5. It really just depends on whether or not they return back to their baseline, right? I mean, you could have someone who falls off. I work with a lot of jockeys too, or even in soccer players, major head blows, right? And they'll stand up and they'll be perfectly fine. And then you have a kid who gets tapped in the head by a locker room door and they're concussed for 2 months. It's very unpredictable and everyone's a little bit different. So every single decision is individualized based off of that patient's symptoms, the patient's history, and those things. And that's why it's so important, again, to go to see a concussion specialist. But if we find that the symptoms are taking longer to resolve with every new concussion that they have, or if the symptoms are worse, or if they're not returning to their baseline, remember that before you can be an athlete, you have to be a regular human being and regular kid. You have to not have headaches every single day. You have to not feel like you're going to vomit every time that you eat. You have to act like a normal person. And then you have to be a student, right? Because you can play soccer, but you can't play soccer your whole life. And your brain is so important in every daily function that you do. So you want to make sure that cognitively that they're doing okay, and in school they're doing okay, and that they're not having significant memory lapses or being really slow or anything like that. And then we can get them back to being an athlete and being able to compete in those things. But if there's problems progressing people, that's kind of when we start to scratch our head and say, really, is this the best thing? Sorry. Is this the best thing for you?
Right.
Or life, are there other things in your future that are more important than this game? And we want kids to exercise and we want people to be active, but swimming might be a better option for you. Some people are a little bit clumsy, more prone to head injuries, those types of things. So it just really, everyone is a little bit different. I will tell you that some of the worst news that I've ever had to deliver to any patient, even in my entire career, has been telling someone that they should stop playing their sport.
Wow.
But if that's the best thing for them in the grand scheme of life, then you have to do that call.
No, and you are right, and that's if that's the worst case information you're getting, that's really not that bad, saving lives, right? One thing is that I know there's a lot of parents out there, and first of all, I appreciate you guys really coming on. Great information. The one last question, and I don't know if, I'm not sure who the director's to, but just as a whole, is a lot of parents, because we got all this information, right? Is there are there discussions? Are there forums that I can encourage parents to go to, right? They need to start, because I'm going to tell you what happens a lot. They may see a talk on concussion, and they just fly straight by. They're just like, oh, no, it's fine. My son is not going to have it, right? Is there anything that you may know that's offered, especially for a lot of these coaches out there that are really not educated about it? Is there anything that, because I know the material that I've been receiving and what I've been spreading it, from MedStar Health, we've been spreading our information out, and I have seen a couple of forums you guys are here. Is there anything that we can do as far as my company, my academy, that we can do to help get the education to some of these parents?
So I'll start. One, I think that it is really important to make sure that you get good information, right? I think right now in this day and age, we're all finding that there's a lot of information, that can be very mixed. We like kids to exercise. We want kids to love sports. We want them to be active, right? Because the alternative to not playing sports, there's a camaraderie, there's a physical fitness part, there's a weight management part, all of that involved, right? And then it can be very scary and overwhelming for parents. And so I think these types of educational tools are really important. The CDC has a heads up to concussion, which is a great resource. And then also, I know that Carissa can talk more about the different information that we have from our MedStar website that also can help to educate those out there. But again, one of the best resources that I have is the heads up to concussion from the CDC website.
Definitely second that. CDC, a lot of our information, we guide that to parents. Great information on reviewing what a concussion is, what the symptoms are, what the red flags are, and talking about that graduated return to play and seeing a concussion-trained medical provider. I think from a coach and an organizational standpoint, the best advice I can give you is to partner with a medical provider like we have with MedStar Health, and be able to give the multidisciplinary approach like we do. We have athletic trainers here today and physical therapists and a doctor. Being able to give you that information. We've created forms and folders for our concussion patients that kind of guide them through that whole process to make it as easy as possible so that a parent doesn't feel overwhelmed. It can be very overwhelming for a parent that has a child with concussion that not only is limiting their sports participation, but also their academics. There's a lot of side effects that can affect the academics, and that can be very stressful for the child and for the parent. So we try to make that process as easy as we possibly can. So best advice is to try to partner with a medical provider who can help you through that process and educate parents. Education for parents and is going to be different than educating athletes, and athletes educating for coaches is going to be different as well. So making sure we kind of come from different aspects. And then I second the CDC heads up. It's great information that if you don't have a medical provider who can be kind of your go-to to contact, the CDC has great information for you.
Now, I greatly appreciate you guys' time, and I'm going to let people know. Listen, the medical provider she's talking about, yes, right, is MedStar Health, because you guys have supported us, helped us even through COVID, return to play. from ACL injuries, and it's really been through nutrition, through exercise, and so you are right, and that needs to be encouraged. That a lot of clubs out there, check with your medical providers. If you want information about MedStar Health, please contact me. We can get you guys to be a partner. It's nothing best for your parents, especially you end up paying funds to get football, if it's tennis, any sport you're doing, just getting connected. I want to say thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to you guys. It's great having you on. The information has been awesome. I will make sure that I now get in my little toolbox, and I will stop even myself. If I get concussed again, I'm not going to be telling anybody to do the ABCs backwards. I'm going to focus. I'm going to listen to you guys more often. Yeah. But no, it was great information. I really appreciate your time. For you out there, thank you for watching Bascome's Corner on Bascome's TV. And I must give it up. MedStar Health, thank you very much for your support, and looking forward to continue support and partner with you in our next topic. Thank you very much. Thanks for being on.
Thank you.
Thank you.